Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Beatdowns with the Boz. Normally, I'm trying to bring you the latest and greatest in Standard, but since we are once again in that time period where Standard has kind of stalled out and we're awaiting the release of the new set, I decided to bring you a Modern deck. So this is a really sweet deck that was played in the top 8 of the recent San Antonio Grand Prix that was Unified Modern. Pretty interesting team event. And it highlighted some strategies that maybe are just slightly below the surface, but are quite good. This build of Bant is a pretty unique deck. It's something that we have seen a little bit of, but hasn't really done that well. But this is a particularly good build of it, and I think it's worth bringing attention to. So just before I go through all the cards, one of the key interactions of this deck is Knight of the Reliquary and Retreat to Coralhelm. So basically, Knight of the Reliquary, it's a 3-mana 2/2, but for each creature, or excuse me, each land in your graveyard, it's going to be getting +1/+1, and you can tap it to sacrifice a forest or plains and search up for any land that you want and put it directly into play. So if you have a Knight of the Reliquary out, and let's say a Temple Garden, you can tap Knight of the Reliquary, sacrifice the Temple Garden, and get any land you want. So you could get a Windswept Heath, for example. And if Retreat to Coralhelm is in play, when that Windswept Heath enters the battlefield, you're going to be able to untap Knight of the Reliquary. So then you can tap and sacrifice your Windswept Heath for anything you want, let's say a Sacred Foundry. And when Sacred Foundry comes in, you're going to be able to tap down one of your opponent's blockers and also make a mana with Sacred Foundry. And your Knight of the Reliquary is going to be untapped from the Windswept Heath coming into play. So you're going to be able to tap Knight of the Reliquary again to sacrifice Sacred Foundry and get something else. So you can basically keep doing this, and depending how much life you have and what lands you have left in your deck, you can untap Knight of the Reliquary a bunch of times, tap down your opponent's blockers, and generate a bunch of mana, and maybe find, let's say a Kessig Wolf Run to make your attack even more devastating. So that's one of the key synergies and is the reason why you want to play this deck. But the deck also has a bunch of other great cards in it. So also in the mana base, in addition to the Kessig Wolf Run, we have a Horizon Canopy, so we can just draw a random card if we want. Ghost Quarter, help disrupt something like Tron, or get a Blinkmoth Nexus, and also a Gavony Township, which is a perennial favorite of mine in decks that also have Birds of Paradise. So to start the curve off, we also have a full 8 1-mana accelerants. Noble Hierarch, absolute all-star. Birds of Paradise, also very good too. At 2-drop slot, we have Voice of Resurgence, which is going to help us in the attrition matches, as well as decks that just have any kind of permission whatsoever. Scavenging Ooze is going to be able to do a lot of good work. We're going to end up taking a lot of damage off of our own mana base, so having 3 Scavenging Oozes is really going to help buffer our life total and just ensure, that we have good, powerful threats that scale into the late game. We have 2 Qasali Pridemages just to kind of round things out. We are playing Collected Company, so playing as few non-creature permanents is pretty important, and Qasali Pridemage is a pretty decent card that has some incidental interaction. We have 2 Selfless Spirits to help protect our creatures. Knight of the Reliquary, as I highlighted, is one of the key reasons to play this deck, so having a creature that can protect it is pretty valuable. We are playing the full 4 copies of Knight of the Reliquary, so maxed out on them as much as we can. We have 2 Tireless Trackers. Little surprising to me, but considering we do have Knight of the Reliquary, Tireless Tracker is going to be good in the any situation where we are trying to grind an opponent out, but also just being able to draw cards is really powerful in a deck like this, because if you draw the right cards, you can have one really explosive turn. And then we have the 2 Retreat to Coralhelms, which are not a particularly good card, but with Knight of the Reliquary, they're very, very powerful. And if you just draw it and play it, it's not going to be a blank. It's just going to be a little on the underpowered side. So pretty happy to have 2 of these in the deck. 4 Collected Companies, definitely want to max out on that. This card is not only card advantage, but it's tempo, and it helps ensure that you're going to see Knight of the Reliquary in like every single game, basically. And then our 1 removal spell, we have 4 Path to Exile. And finally, to round out our interaction, we've got 4 Spell Quellers, which notably can be hit off of Collector Company. So that's the main deck. In the sideboard, we've got 2 Stony Silences when we're trying to face Tron or Affinity. There's a Staticaster, which is going to be good against all the weenie decks, particularly decks like Elves that would usually give a deck like this a very hard time. 3 Reflector Mages, just in case we need a little bit more interaction for creatures on the ground. We've got a pretty nice blue package to fight control decks, 2 Negates, 2 Unified Wills, and a Vendilion Clique. And then just to round things out, another Tireless Tracker when we're trying to grind people out. Elspeth, Sun's Champion, which is going to be great at grinding people out as well as dealing with Tarmogoyfs and Death Shadows. And then finally, an additional Ghost Quarter against the land decks and a Bojuka Bog in case we need a little more graveyard hate. So that's the deck. I'm pretty excited to be playing it for you guys, and now we're going to get into some games. All right, here we go in our first match. We unfortunately don't have a good hand. And we're on the draw. Nightmare Scenario. This hand is certainly keepable. And I do like the fact that we have a 1-drop and a 3-drop that will be advantageous to play ahead of schedule, as well as a 2-drop in case things go awry. So for a 6-card hand, things could line up really poorly for us, but you know, all things considered, doing all right. It's going to be pretty difficult to get value off this Spell Queller because I think it's pretty likely that my opponent either kills the Spell Queller or kills my Birds of Paradise. Well, that's going to actually be really annoying. So what do I do here? I think I just want to cast Selfless Spirit and Path to Exile. Could also just do Selfless Spirit and Noble Hierarch. I'd rather not ramp my opponent. So this way I'll have some pressure on the board. Thing that I believe I'm up against Abzan Company, and the thing that I'm really worried about is Collected Company. So if on this upcoming turn I play Misty Rainforest, Path to Exile, the Voice of Resurgence, I'll have the Spell Queller free to tag a Collected Company without anything going horribly wrong. And my goal is going to be to ignore this Voice of Resurgence and just fly over it and race it. Which isn't going to be... Alright. I was really worried that that was like an Orzhov Pontiff. Orzhov Pontiff would wreck my board. That would be super bad news. So it wouldn't be... I'd kind of like to play this other Noble Hierarch, but I think it's too important for me to keep up Spell Queller. Oh shoot, I could have done it. I'm bad at this game. I have enough mana. So missed a point of damage. Eldritch Evolution, well, it's probably as good of a thing to counter as anything else. Especially because it just gets more pressure onto the board. And I really don't want to see what kind of crazy thing my opponent can ramp into. Oh, that's a nightmare. So now my opponent gets to cast it again. This time my opponent will lose the Kitchen Finks, but still not feeling that great about it. To be fair, with the second Noble Hierarch, I'm attacking for 4 in the air, whether I have a Selfless Spirit and a... Oh my gosh. Wait, what the... Oh yeah, that is how that works. So I can't quite bash through this. Would have been really nice to have a Noble Hierarch this game, but I suppose Noble Hierarch would have just gotten pathed like the Spell Queller. So this Sigarda kills me in 2 hits and is just a unbeatable wall. Definitely not feeling good about this game. Wow, what? I'm just not up against what I thought I would be up against. Well, guess I can try to hold out. I mean, I can always have like a Miracle Collected Company. So this way I can chump block the Sigarda with, oh jeez, an Eldritch Evolution Siege Rhino deck. I wonder how many Eldritch Evolutions my opponent is playing. Alright, so Elspeth seems good against a lot of what my opponent's got. Tireless Tracker seems like something that could be useful in a Trishani matchup. Izzet Staticaster is really good against Lingering Souls, not much else. I don't think I want the Reflector Mage because so many of my opponent's cards have come into play abilities. So I think what I'm going to do is take out the 2 retreat Coralhelms, go down on synergy a little bit. Actually, I think maybe I want to keep the retreats. I don't think my opponent's going to have that much removal. I saw mostly creatures. I only saw Path to Exile. So I may be able to kind of get them with retreat. So it's mainly a decision as to whether or not I want to play Izzet Staticaster. I kind of assume that my opponent has cards like Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise. So I think I am going to bring in the Izzet Staticasters, or the single one. And then I'll just take out these 3. And so I've got 1 Spell Queller. And I think that's it. It's kind of interesting whether or not I keep the retreat in, because I don't think my opponent's gonna have like that much removal. So I think the potential to, use it as a way to like really kill my opponent in a situation that I may not otherwise be able to, is something that's certainly available. I think that my opponent may get ahead on cards with random mid-range elements, but then he's just got creatures and I've got a retreat to Coralhelm and under the Reliquary or something like that. So I think it still has usefulness, but I will certainly admit that I'm not 100% sure. And my opponent could just Abrupt Decay it. So I think I want to just use my mana efficiently. So I'm just going to play this now. I could wait to play, like I could do something like play Noble Hierarch and the Scavenging Ooze, and then play Coralhelm next turn with a fetch land. And my opponent might decide to just Abrupt Decay it now, but I don't know. I'm not even that disappointed if my opponent Abrupt Decays it. And there we go. Ooh, I like that. Jeez. Elspeth's going to be like ridiculous. If my opponent doesn't have a Thoughtseize, she can just take control of the game. Lingering Souls could be a good way for my opponent to kill Elspeth, though. It looks like we're going to Elspeth. Turn 4, Elspeth? Is that good? I really want to make sure this goes through. My opponent doesn't second guess himself and, you know, kill one of my mana dorks inside of combat. The quote unquote technical best play is to attack with Scavenging Ooze first. Wow, my opponent just concedes. Because it has the Exalted trigger, so my opponent can't block it, and it just denies him a little bit of information when we are going into combat. So we're a little mana light, and we don't have a turn 1 mana accelerant, which is a little unfortunate, but our opponent's deck doesn't seem that fast. Never mind. We are going to get run over. I do get to go turn 2 Scavenging Ooze, turn 3 Nether Reliquary, which isn't even that good. They're both just going to be 2/2s. I think I'm going to... So I would like to use Path to Exile on my first turn. I obviously don't want to Path the Bird. Hoping to get like a Kitchen Finks or something like that. So I think that I'm just going to play Temple Garden untapped. It's obviously a huge tell to my opponent, but I think I'd rather play the Temple Garden than the Horizon Canopy. It's like 2 damage either way, but if I mean, I'm hoping to draw a land that taps for blue for the Retreat to Coralhelm, and if I end up drawing like another basic land, then I don't have to play the Horizon Canopy and I save myself a point of damage. I think my opponent's going to sort of know what's up either way. Oh, wow. Well, this certainly makes me not want to cast Path to Exile. I don't think my opponent's going to take my Path to Exile. My opponent would not have a problem if I cast that card. Yeah, neither Reliquary is definitely the most powerful card. So I certainly could block and trade, but I don't think that's really worth it. Wow, Collected Company is nice. Pick up. Now if I could just draw another land. I could actually... No, that's not... I'm not doing that. Never mind. And I have no intention of casting this Path to Exile on my opponent's turn, or at all, if possible. And this is one of the things that's definitely really annoying about Path to Exile, and one of the reasons it's like not good is because, I mean, if I had a Fatal Push or a Lightning Bolt or any other removal spell, my opponent would be in a really bad spot because I could just bolt the bird. But in this situation, I mean, I don't want to cast my Path to Exile at all. Even my opponent draws a land, I still don't want to cast Path to Exile. My opponent has Siege Rhino and 5 mana Sigarda in his deck, and who knows what else to get with Eldritch Evolution. So one thing that is a little awkward is can't really do anything good with this Spell Queller with that voice in play. This Kitchen Finks I can more or less ignore. And if I had a land to play, I would consider playing the Noble Hierarch in the Retreat, but we're just gonna go for the Coco. No! Another Scavenging Ooze is not what the doctor ordered. It was pretty unfortunate. You live by the Coco and you die by the Coco. That is what they say. Is it Siege Rhino time? Wow, Wilt-Leaf Liege. So I'm probably going to have to Path to Exile that. Wow, this is an attack for 9? Jeez. Yeah, whatever. Take it. It's kind of a lot of Exalted triggers. It's going to be pretty tough to finish my opponent off on the ground, given the circumstances, but this retreat to Coralhelm may be useful. With a fetch land, I could tap down both the Voice and the Kitchen Finks, which would be pretty sneaky. So if I draw a fetch land, I'm going to feel like I'm in good shape. My opponent's got a lot of cards in hand. I have to imagine that there's some pretty powerful things they can do. I would love to trade off a Scavenging Ooze here. I have so many. I think I kind of have to block because Siege Rhino could just sort of wreck me. It is annoying, though, that this is going to be able to play defense, and I'm not getting the opportunity to exile it with the persist trigger on the stack, and I mean, I guess I could have not played the Qasali Pridemage and, you know, had that mana open, but I think it's just too good to play all my spells. Wow, is my opponent going to path both Scavenging Oozes? This is my only way to gain life, which kind of important. I'd like to draw Elspeth here. I do kind of like that, but I do not have red mana. So that's a problem. Oh man, and I really can't cast this Spell Queller. It's like a pretty bad spot. What can I do here? I think I gotta draw a card. That was good. I'm almost tempted to try to ambush my opponent. See, this can attack was a 5/5. I think I just attack with the Pridemage. And I don't think I'm gonna get greedy and try to ambush. Don't really need another Hierarch. So I feel like we're doing okay. It's a pretty close game. My opponent was short on mana for the beginning of it, but I couldn't really capitalize on the situation. Wow, now I really need that red mana source. Lingering Souls is like big game. Man, if I could draw a fetch land here, that would be great. Oh no, that's like a turn. Well, actually, I guess it's not a turn too late, but and I can cast the Spell Queller too. That was a big solid Pridemage. I'm a little surprised my opponent doesn't just block with the Voice of Resurgence. I'm also pretty concerned about another Wilt-Leaf Liege. That would be pretty devastating. I'm actually really surprised my opponent blocked with Birds of Paradise instead of Voice of Resurgence. Voice of Resurgence would have made a pretty big creature. Oh, wait, did I just not block? I did not. Okay. Well, I'm going to be dead to Siege Rhino either way. So if my opponent is Siege Rhino, I'm just dead. Wow, well, this is going to be a good Izzet Staticaster. And a path. Jeez. Did we win this game? Well, that was awesome, obviously. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Exalted triggers. I can attack with a Spell Queller in the air and knock him to 1, which is pretty good. So let's actually, I don't even really need to path the voice right now. Yeah, I guess I'll path the voice just because I don't have a I don't really want to have to block it, so. Actually, I should attack with the Tireless Tracker because it would be lethal, and that would force a chump block. And that way my opponent just has even less to work with. He's got a few more life points, but I don't think putting my opponent to 1 or 7 right now is actually much different. Although to be fair, there's the Rhino. All right, well, I was dead to the Rhino no matter what I did. Pretty cool game though. All right, here we are in our second match. We are on the play. We have a good hand. We don't have a Knight of the Reliquary or a Collected Company, which are our heavy hitters. But this hand is nothing to scoff at. We've got plenty of gas. I like leading with the Birds of Paradise here because it's more likely to die, being the first thing out. So I'm not gonna be able to make use of the Exalted trigger for a couple turns or two, and I'd rather have the Noble Hierarch be the one that sticks as opposed to the bird. So play the bird first to bait out the removal. I feel like there's a good chance my opponent's gonna take Scavenging Ooze. Just because it's the card in my hand with the most raw power. But if my opponent doesn't have a whole lot of removal, he or she may take the Spell Queller instead. That looks like the case. My opponent just wants to make sure he or she can cast his spells. Again, the Scavenging Ooze is the better threat. So I'm playing the Qasali Pridemage first because I think it's more likely that if my opponent has a removal spell, my opponent's just going to have to cast it sooner rather than later. And Scavenging Ooze will be better in the long run. Well, this is going nicely. We get to attack with a 4/4 Qasali Pridemage. Exalted really is a sweet mechanic. So here I have this path to Exile. I don't really need to path the Tarmogoyf right now, so I'm not going to. And if my opponent plays something like a Dark Confidant, then I definitely, well, no, I guess I'll do it. If my opponent played like a Dark Confidant or, heaven forbid they played a Olivia Valdarin that could just machine gun down my board. That's a situation where I'd much rather have the path. But so might as well attack with both. It's not like my opponent's going to have a Sunblast Angel. So I doubt my opponent has something like Tassiger or Gurmag Angler, but he might. I'm not going to do anything else particularly useful with this mana, so I'm not going to use Qasali Pridemage on Nile Spellbomb, and it's not like my opponent is going to cast a Kitchen Finks and Eldritch Evolution in the same turn, so. And I would not have priority at any point to be able to break up that Lingering Souls. So my Scavenging Ooze does get to attack as a 5/5. So that's cool. And if I could find a Gavony Township, ooh, that would be nice. That would be nice. No intention of blocking any of these. Even though the life loss does matter. So here, I actually just attack with both. So I wonder what my opponent has in hand. Seems like my opponent probably just has removal spells in hand. That seems to be the case. And this Shambling Vent's going to be a little bit of a problem. I think there's a good chance my opponent just has a land in hand as the last card. But my opponent could just have another removal spell and is being frugal. Shambling Vent is a go. No good way to deal with this. Man, a forest is not what the doctor ordered. So Selfless Spirit can attack for 4. Guess I'll do that. I wish I drew a Collected Company here. Obviously, I can play the forest for some value. Notably, I would get a Scry, or I could untap my Selfless Spirit, but I think that it's better to keep the forest in hand and have my opponent maybe worry about a removal spell, maybe worry about Collected Company, maybe worry about Spell Queller. And who knows, I may find myself in a situation where playing this forest allows me to tap down an important blocker. So I think I should trade with this Grimflayer. I don't think my opponent can get Delirium unless they have a the creature that cycles for 2. So my opponent had 2 card types, one of which was already an instant. He had a fetch land, which would have been 3 types, but... So I can attack for 3, but that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. I could trade my Selfless Spirit with 2 of my opponent's spirits. I think I want to save the fetch land activation to tap down this Shambling Vent. So I think I'll... Well, if I scry and then crack the fetch land, that doesn't really help me at all, does it? Man, if I still had that Qasali Pridemage, I could tap down 1 spirit and attack with, you know, something else that's good. I guess I could attack with 1 Bird of Paradise. Trade 1 bird for 1 spirit. Yeah, I'll do that. It feels awful. But even though it gets rid of Shambling Vent, I just need Collected Company. Nothing else will do. So if my opponent activates Shambling Vent, then I'll crack my fetch land and tap it. Otherwise, I will just scry. No way. Come on, something good. That is not enough. And Gavony Township would be amazing. Ugh. Not doing it. So there's 2 creatures in the graveyard. I mean, I can chump block with more. I think my Scavenging Ooze is likely gonna just die to a something big. Just another okay. Time for me to do my thing. So at least I get to at least consider the possibility of presenting lethal on my turn. Wow, is my opponent not going to attack with all 3 spirits? That's pretty big sign of weakness. It would be crazy if my opponent doesn't have a removal spell here. I could block with 2, and that would mean that if I draw a fetch land, I can still play it. But I think I'm just going to accept that I won't play any more fetch lands this game. None of the Reliquary is good, but probably not enough. And if I'd drawn another creature with Exalted, that would have been really sweet. I really hope that I can kill my opponent here because I am dead to those 3 Lingering Souls tokens if I can't kill. So here goes nothing. Is that game, buddy? No, it doesn't look like it. Ugh, I need another Exalted thing. All right, well, now we just bluff a collecting company and hope to get insanely lucky. And we're dead. Well, kind of a cool game. I definitely think I want Izzet Staticaster. Definitely think I want Elspeth and Tireless Tracker. So basically the same as last time, except for this time I don't think I want the retreat to Coralhelms. And I'm going to trim 1 Spell Queller. I think I'm up against a more classical Abzan midrange deck that's going to be a lot of removal as opposed to the last deck that was a lot of threats. And so I just don't want these retreat to Coralhelms because they're too likely that they do too little. So especially when there's lingering souls on the board. So this is definitely a good start. Because it is an attrition-y matchup, there's a good chance that I do not try to play my Tireless Tracker on turn 2, but instead wait until turn 3 when I can play it with a fetch land. Because the card advantage is probably going to be worth more than the tempo. But I'm probably not going to be able to keep my Tireless Tracker. And this is a clear situation where, once again, I hate Path to Exile. It's just so bad in my mind. Like, if my opponent just plays a Tarmogoyf here, Tarmogoyf is going to be a 3/4. And it beats what I have on the board, but I don't want to Path to Exile my opponent's Tarmogoyf on turn 2. Yeah, Path to Exile really is the worst. I hate it. I hate Path to Exile so much. And if my opponent plays Lingering Souls, it's like completely beats my board. This would have been a good draw if my Tireless Tracker had been able to stick on the board, but man, this is not the way I drew it up. To be fair, this isn't really how my opponent drew it up either. Slowly getting whittled away by a Birds of Paradise. Like, I wonder at what point my opponent tries to fire off a removal spell on one of these guys. Is this Siege Rhino? No. Gideon? Jeez. How do I ever beat that card? Oh, there we go. So that Tireless Tracker was definitely definitely needed. So if my opponent attacks, it's actually an interesting decision whether or not I block. Because I could block and crack a clue, and then I'd have 3 toughness to just gobble it up. But I would have to worry about Fatal Push being turned on in that case. My opponent has a Windswept Heath to, turn it on, so it's kind of irrelevant, but I think I would have just taken the 2. And a Siege Rhino, alright. Well, things are definitely getting a bit more complicated. Another Noble Hierarch and fetch land is not what we needed. Ooh, it's not looking good. No siree. Yeah, we're kind of dead. Really need that Elspeth. Even drew 2 extra cards. I drew so many lands though, and one of those extra cards was just another land. And the other one was kind of just another land too. So this deck is like 50% lands. Well, 23 lands and 7 mana accelerants, so 50% mana. So now this is going to be extra bad for me too, because if my opponent has I assume my opponent has removal spells in his hand and just hasn't wanted to use them on my Noble Hierarchs and Birds of Paradise, but now that Gideon is in range of being struck down by a Birds of Paradise, it's likely that my opponent decides to protect Gideon with those removal spells. Oh, can't beat that card either. Man, this is bad. So I don't even crack this. Another land? Ay, 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 ay. No idea what I'm supposed to do, especially if this Gideon lives. Even if I get to Path to Kitchen Finks, I'm still in Trump Block territory. So dead. I think this is about the time the old boss has to throw in the towel. But if he lets me kill his Gideon, I'll play on. I mean, sure, man. Let's do it. Rock and roll. Need some wicked good top decks. I would actually be surprised if my opponent has another basic. Okay. Yeah, usually these mid-range 3-color decks only have 3 basics. Oh, I can't beat that card. Nope. I did not play the Izzet Staticaster. Yeah, that is Voice of Resurgence. Not gonna cut it. Not a good run so far. Alright, so here we are, third match. We get to be on the play. Ooh, we have a good hand. This is probably our best hand yet. If things go right, this could be amazing. So we'll see how things go. A Thoughtseize would obviously devastate our hand. Some counter magic could be annoying to deal with as well. Here I'm actually tempted to play the Tireless Tracker because it'll force my opponent to respond. Like if my opponent is a Mana Leak or a Remand, they're not going to be able to hold it up. And I'd rather have my Collected Company resolve than my Tireless Tracker live. Also, there is a chance that my opponent just has card draw and permission and doesn't actually have a way to deal with Tireless Tracker now that it's on the board. So I feel like this is the best way to play the cards that I have available. Retreat to Coralhelm, typically against control decks, is really powerful as a, or I should say non-creature threats are really powerful, but Retreat to Coralhelm just isn't that threatening. This is like Path to Exile. If my opponent's stopping me here. Yeah. Would have been nice if I had Spell Queller. Wow, another Collector Company. That is gas. But now I get to do exactly what I wanted to do, which was just resolve Collected Company. So not the best stuff, but you know, still kind of doing it. And next turn we have some nice options. If our opponent's holding up counter magic, we can just run out the Retreat to Coralhelm. But if our opponent is not holding up counter magic, then we can just, you know, consider firing off another Collected Company. Wow, going after the Scavenging Ooze instead of the Tireless Tracker. That's fairly interesting. One, two, three. So I can actually cast through a mana leak. That's pretty nice. So I guess my opponent has Snapcaster Mage, and that's why my opponent wanted to get rid of the Scavenging Ooze first. That is what I would read from this situation. So I think what I'm going to do is when my opponent... What is this? Blessed Alliance. Well, I could hit a Spell Queller. So I might as well try. Nope. But I will get the cards that insulate me from sweepers. A little unfortunate. So I could have played the Retreat to Coralhelm before I played a land, but I was under the impression that my opponent might have a mana leak. And so I wanted to try to keep my mana open. Oh, wow. Well, this is really bad news for my opponent now. So, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can draw a card and then decide if I want to Township. And this is good enough where I do not need to Township. Wait, did I even play Land yet? I did. Okay. I could have also tapped my Noble Hierarch for mana when I played the land, untapped the Noble Hierarch, but I think that's something that I'll try to make use of next turn. So at this point, I know that I'm going to... Actually, I should play my Noble Hierarch first. I mean, my Nether Reliquary, since I still have 3 mana open. Can't mana leak this. Another company is great. This is obviously really bad for my opponent. And my opponent missed a land drop, but my opponent also double path to exiled me. And it turned out that I had a hand that could make use of the mana, so... You live by the path, you die by the path. You have killed one of my creatures for 4 mana. Good job. Ooh, so now we get to do things. Now we get to do things. So let's get a Flooded Strand. We're gonna get a really, really big Knight of the Reliquary. We get all the lands. Turn my deck out. Which, not very many. Certainly running down my clock a fair bit. Oops. I could do this for a little longer, but there's really no need. The old 16-8 Knight of the Reliquary gets the job done. And we did it. Well, we got to do our move. That was cool. All right, so Path to Exile can get the heck out of here. I also think that my opponent's going to be boarding into more of a controlling deck. So these Retreat to Coralhelms are probably not going to be worthwhile. So I've got 6 cards taking out. I think that all 4 of these counters and the Vendilion Clique and the Tireless Tracker are all worth bringing in. I don't think I want Elspeth coming in this matchup because there's Celestial Colonnade and there's just counter spells. So I guess Elspeth's better than like a Qasali Pridemage. So we'll do that. And with that, we are good to go. So his hand's a little on the slow side, and we're on the draw, so I think we can do better. His hand's much faster. In a matchup where one of my opponent's main forms of defense is Path to Exile, I'm always going to scry the land to the bottom. So Ancestral Visions on turn 1 is certainly what my opponent wants and needs. It's going to make things much more difficult for me. So it is nice that I get to cast 2 spells a turn here. And if I could draw another land, I would love to play Tireless Tracker and get some clues. It would not be particularly exciting if my entire turn was, you know, attack with Noble Hierarch, keep mana open for Spell Queller. Most certainly be less than ideal. I also have to be fairly concerned about a sweeper. So I am a little worried about Supreme Verdict. So I think I'm actually going to do nothing here. Because it's, I mean, it's pretty advantageous for my opponent to play Supreme Verdict here if he has it. And if he or she does, then me just ending the turn with a Spell Queller, untapping, drawing a land, playing Tireless Tracker is like perfect. So I actually should have eaten my opponent's land at the end of turn. Condemn. Oh, and a textless one. So I believe that puts it like 3 from the top of my library. I don't really want to Spell Queller this. I think I'm going to just play another Ooze. So I might be playing this too slow and patiently, but I'm a little bit on the front foot, and I was very concerned about a sweeper. Might as well just go after everything else. Be pretty baller if my opponent just cast Archangel Avacyn here. This gives me a shuffle, which is convenient. So I do have to worry about Cryptic Command, which is pretty annoying. But I will have if my opponent wants to use a removal spell, I will have priority. That part's cool. Alright, and there's the mana leak. Makes me feel awful about myself for not playing the land, but I mean, I was basically playing around mana leak before, so I should have continued to play around it. But now I'm in pretty bad shape because now I can't even attack. My opponent has infinite cards. I do have a lot more mana, which is nice, but so if I could draw one more land, I could cast all 3 cards that I have at once. So I may try to wait until I have that as an option. I guess that works. All right, here we go. Counter War. So I'm pretty sure when I Spell Queller my opponent's Path to Exile, it's just going to be gone forever. I mean, this kind of gets me nowhere. because I'm still probably going to be able to just answer everything I'm doing. The 3-mana counterspell? It's the Delve counterspell, Logic Knot. Oh, sir. I've got something about that. So unfortunately, I still don't feel like I'm in a particularly good spot from here on out. Ooh, maybe this doesn't work the way I thought it does. That'd be unfortunate. Gavony Township or Kessig Wolf Run would be real nice. Also, just being able to untap with anything decent in play would be really nice. Well, that's unfortunate. A collected company is what I need. Voice of Resurgence is what I got. Voice is like a good card against this deck, but it's not very powerful. So I might as well. All right, so this could drag on for quite a while, but if I'm going to try to win the third game, I think I need to just cut my losses. Seeing Detention Sphere makes me want to consider keeping in a Qasali Pridemage, but I think all my other cards are just too much better. Too much better? Is that really what I want to say? I think I'm just going to run the same configuration back with no changes. Now that I'm on the play, we'll see if my opponent will be able to execute the same sort of strategy. I would suspect that the answer is no, but we'll see. Ooh, Knight of the Reliquary is real nice, but I'm going to play Voice first. My opponent has a path to exile. My opponent kind of needs to cast it right away. Condemn is certainly not going to cut it. And, maybe I get to stick my Knight of the Reliquary. And there we go. So now I will be able to play Knight of the Reliquary. Whether or not it does anything, that's a different question. Electric Company's nice. I think I'm actually going to Company first. So there's a couple different ways I could play this. I could play Company now, or I could play Knight and hold Company open in case my opponent has a sweeper. I think I'll play the Knight now and then try to bait my opponent into playing a sweeper and then companying after it. If I could get one on tap with this Knight, I would be a happy camper. Getting a Gavony Township or Wolf Run would be really sweet. And I don't really want to crack this Windswept Heath because I don't know if I need a red or a blue mana. And I also, you know, it could be good with a Tireless Tracker. Well, this is a little unfortunate that I'm losing my Knight, but I definitely didn't think this was completely unlikely. Yeah, I guess I do this. So if my opponent has Supreme Verdict here, I'm going to be in pretty bad shape. I'll have the Voice of Resurgence, but that's it. I'm really hoping my opponent has anything else. Having only 3 Noble Hierarchs, I don't think that's enough pressure for me to want to hold on to my collected company. So for the second path to exile, alright, I almost thought my opponent might go after my Spell Queller. Man, if I could draw a Kessig Wolf Run off the top now, that would be nice. So I like this Knight of the Reliquary, but I'm really worried about a sweeper. The thing that's a little worrisome is I think if my opponent had a sweeper, my opponent would have just cast it last turn. And I don't think it's going to be that good for me to pace my threats. So I think that if my opponent had a sweeper, my opponent would have played it last turn. And in the event that my opponent doesn't have a sweeper, then it's a lot better for me to play this Knight. And now this is great. So let's see here. What's the best way for me to do this? If I just play the Spell Queller, I think there's a good chance that... I think what I want to do is get Gavony Township. I think Gavony Township is going to be the move. Ooh, my opponent might have Disallow. It's like kind of annoying. I actually hadn't thought of that. Well, if my opponent had Disallow, I think my opponent would have just disallowed the Knight's activated ability. So now I'm pushing damage, and I wonder what my opponent has in their hand. No plays. Sincerely doubt my opponent has all lands in hand. This doesn't seem like a sweeper slow roll. I wonder what my opponent could have in hand. I don't even think I do anything with the knight. No, I guess I do attack with the knight. Four, 7, 8, 9, 10. And wow, that's game. I wish I could see what was in my opponent's hand. That was unreal. All right, here we are, match number 4, making a comeback. And it's kind of a sketchy hand, but I'm going to keep it. If we just magically rip a land off the top, then this hand is great. And if our opponent has an early removal spell, we still have another Noble Hierarch to play. So, and considering we're against a Temple Garden deck, we're probably going to be okay with this hand. Although it would certainly be nice to have a land. Touche. So, I think that the most important thing is just going to be having access to mana. So, I'd rather play the Noble Hierarch rather than one of my 2-drops. Ooh, that's scary. Scary stuff. I wish if I had a land drop, I would just play the Noble Hierarch to develop my mana and then hold up Spell Queller. I think I am just going to hold up the Spell Queller. So, think a lot of times I like to just counter rather than the ramp, the payoff. But I think this is just like way too much mana, especially because there's Knight of the Reliquary, that my opponent could just cast 2 powerful things this turn. And so like Lotus Cobra is kind of a threat in and of itself. Lotus Cobra is such a sweet card. Also, my opponent could just play the Lotus Cobra, play a fetch land, and say go, and be able to collect a company, on my turn after I've passed with all this mana open and not using it. So opponent could play another Reliquary, and that'd be pretty bad for me. Oh, Renegade Rallier. Did not expect that. That is pretty cute with Lotus Cobra. Oh, Collected Company is a nice one. But I think I'm going to do the same thing and just hold Spell Queller up. I do have to worry about like a Gavony Township here, which would be devastating. And obviously there's nothing I can do to prevent my opponent from getting it. So yeah, actually maybe it's wrong here to hold up Spell Queller. Maybe what I should do is play the Hierarch and the Voice, because the Voice is a really good chump blocker. and then try to set up some sort of sequence where I collected a company in my own Knight of the Reliquary, untap, play Retreat to Coralhelm, and try to win from there, like win on that turn. I don't think I'm going to win by just attacking my opponent for 3 every turn in the air with Spell Queller. Well, that would be kind of bad for me. A lot of my lands are fetch lands. Obviously, totally weird that my opponent's playing it now. Seems pretty clear that my opponent's just trying to bait something out. But can't really do anything if this guy's still on the board. Does host my opponent's Knight of the Reliquary though, so maybe I wonder if my opponent had really thought that through. Oh no, it's if opponent. Okay. Makes quite a bit of sense. So the other version of this deck that did really well in Unified Modern was playing Courser, which is pretty cool. I like that card in this deck a lot. And now I feel like I'm basically dead. So I don't think I'm dead to a Kessig Wolf Run. So I think I could attack with one of these. I've done a lot considering I've only drawn 1 land. I mean, that is good. Now my opponent is Knight of the Reliquary in hand. So my opponent can't kill me here. So if I can just make it so he can't kill me the next turn, maybe I can do something real fancy with this Retreat to Coralhelm. So I might actually still be in this. Especially because if my opponent attacks, I get to have a huge Voice of Resurgence token. My opponent doesn't really have any meaningful interaction here. Oh, and actually to note, if my opponent is playing the other Knight of the Reliquary Bant deck from the top 4 of Unified Modern, it had 2 Gavony Townships, and I'm pretty sure it actually had 0 Retreat to Coralhelms, if I remember correctly. So I think it's smart that my opponent is shuffling away this Tireless Tracker. This is not a matchup that's going to be about attrition. This game's probably going to be over in the next 2 turns because we both have a lot of mana, kind of a lot of resources, and you can do some powerful stuff. I don't have that much mana, but I've got enough to do powerful things. Those things are coming. So if my opponent does have the thing, he can get red mana with this. So red, green, pump it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Be 9 damage. I think I should still block anyway. So my opponent can't play another Reliquary and activate Gavony Township this turn. Oh wait, yes he can, because he's got a mana floating. And my opponent even had a land drop. Alright, so actually this that Voice of Resurgence block was probably premature. I don't think it means much. Also, I think my opponent's might be on straight green white. So basically my plan is to hit Knight of the Reliquary off this collecting company and win. If I can't do that, probably dead. It looks like my opponent can make his Knight of the Reliquaries 11/11s. So yeah, my Voice of Resurgence jump blocking was definitely a little premature. I wonder what my opponent's doing here. Well, maybe I'll get lucky and you know, hit a Spell Queller? No. And I'm completely dead. Oh boy. Not good, folks. Not good. Wow, brutal. 2 trackers. My opponent's going to have infinite tokens. I should have taken my opportunity to attack for 4 last turn with my Spell Queller. Kind of wanted all hands on deck to fight off an attack, but looks like the only way that I'm going to be able to win this is with chip damage. Not looking good for the home team, that's for sure. Man, talk about card advantage. Course of Kruphix, Renegade Rallier, and Tireless Tracker. That is a lot. So I could technically trade with one of these. Well, I would be trading both my Spell Quellers and Elemental. I think that 1, 2. I think I'm just gonna jump block with this bozo. I'll jump block with the bird. Every point of mana is obviously precious, but I don't know what kind of work I can do with Scavenging Ooze on my opponent's land situation. Would be nice to get those knights small enough where I can ooze them or block with the elemental, but my opponent's still got the Gavony Township to make everything else huge. So, and the Tireless Trackers are going to get monstrous. So I still feel like I'm on my own copy of Knight of the Reliquary or bust. I'm enjoying seeing all the cards my opponent has access to, though. Jeez. I mean, with this retreat to Coralhelm, if I draw a land, maybe there's still some way I punk my opponent out of the game. I feel like my opponent can probably just attack with everything that would kill me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attackers with that are all lethal. So if my opponent attacks with everything, I think I can gain 2 life and go up to 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blockers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and take 1, 2, 5 damage. But with the township, it would be 8. So I should be dead here if my opponent just attacks with everything and activates Gavony Township. Wow, my opponent has a Crucible. Unreal. That's for the old Ghost Quarter win. Uh-oh, this may not be good for my opponent if he doesn't attack with everything. I feel like I just can't win. Okay, I'm just going to concede this game and save my clock. Definitely think this is a matchup where Elspeth Sun's Champion is going to be good. I also think board presence is going to be the most important thing. So Reflector Mage is going to be gas. Don't think this is a place where Qasali Pridemage does anything. But I do think both Tireless Tracker and Izzet Staticaster are going to have a place. Not particularly excited about Path to Exile, but, you know, whatevs. So, and that's that. I think this is going to be a good matchup for Retreat to Coralhelm. It's just a really powerful thing, and there's not a lot of interaction outside of blocking that my opponent's going to have for my attackers. So actually a little suspect of this Staticaster. It'll really only hit the small stuff. Spell Queller is probably better. I also like kind of wonder about probably don't need Selfless Spirit either. I think the Scavenging Oozes are going to be good at regulating my opponent's knights, and they can just be really big, powerful threats on their own. I think Voice is going to be good for like momentum. And I think all of these are going to be good. I bet I could get rid of one Path to Exile. All right, now I'm starting to feel a bit better about this configuration. Perfect. And now I have like all my cards that are either interactive or good in a board stall, which is, you know, exactly how I want things to be basically. And with my Path to Exile, the only thing I really want to path is a Knight of the Reliquary. Everything else I should be able to sort of ignore. An early Tireless Tracker may be something I need to path to, I guess, but obviously not going to be excited about that. I don't really care about the 1 point of damage. Could have also just... well, I couldn't have played the Forest, because then I wouldn't have had a white mana for Voice. Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, getting the 1 extra mana there is good, but it's not gonna, like, make or break things. Ooh. I like that. So my opponent doesn't seem to have blue in their deck. Maybe that'll change post-sideboard, but maybe I could collect a company into a Spell Queller. One thing that's also kind of nice is now that I have this Voice in play, it's going to be unlikely that my opponent waits until my turn to cast a collected company. More likely they just main phase it. I'm kind of tempted to just do this. If my opponent has a collected company, like I guess they'll just wait until my turn to fire it off, but if they were going to cast something on their turn, it would have been nice to, Spell Queller it. And I definitely got the better end of this stick. Is there a path? No path. Oh, and another knight. Jeez. So what do I want to do here? Access to some mana. I think I just want to play all my stuff. An attack for 4 with my tracker. Seems reasonable. And feel like I'm firmly in the driver's seat of this game now. And I want to do this on my turn because I know my opponent's playing even Mind Sensor, so my opponent could play something like the 6 mana Elspeth and minus it, and that would be devastating. That would probably just be game right there. Because it would be a one-sided wrath. Kill everything on my side of the board except my Noble Hierarch, and it would kill nothing from my opponent's side of the board. So 6 mana Elspeth is definitely like the card that I do not want my opponent to play. But there's not really any good way for me to play around it, I don't think. So I'm a little tempted to just take this. But yeah, I mean, whatever, I'll take it, sure. All my creatures will be so much bigger than it the next turn. I don't really want to path it. My opponent, you know, suddenly does something like Temur Battle Rage, Gorklan Rampager, then I'll path to exile it, but, you know. All my opponents is doing is playing more mana. Kind of like, who cares? Sun Titan, okay. It's kind of decent, but not really decent enough. So I think this is a situation where I may be able to just kill my opponent with a Kessig Wolf Run. Haven't run the numbers quite yet, but so let's see. So I hold one knight back. I can get Wolf Run. I actually need to hold both knights back because I need to get the red mana and the Wolf Run. So that would mean I'd be able to pump for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can't, but I can do some pretty big damage. So go to combat, see how my opponent blocks. My opponent doesn't block the elemental. I believe my opponent is dead, but see. All right, so I think that's game. Soon find out. Yeah, because crack this, sack that, get Wolf Run. Foundry pays for it. Yeah, I'm doing this right. And that's game. Pretty cool. Punk my opponent out of the game. I did like that configuration, and I would like to run it back again. I feel like the tracker is more of a 4-drop. Retreat to Coralhelm is more of like a 5-drop. And when you put the deck like this, even though there's a lot of 3-mana spells, it makes it so that it doesn't really look like a curve that's excessively clogged at any one point. This hand seems too slow for this matchup. This hand seems nice. Wow, Avacyn's Pilgrim. That's when you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for 1-mana accelerants. To be fair, though, after Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise, I think Avacyn's Pilgrim is the best 1-mana accelerant for these type of decks. Because if you already have green mana, you just want to have something that taps for white. And I don't really want to get messed up by a whatchamacallit, Haven Mind Sensor. Although, no, I think that was actually just bad play. I should have just saved it for my tracker. I've got an extra land in case of a Mind Sensor, so my opponent has more explosive mana, but doesn't seem like they're doing that much with the mana. Lotus Cobra and Tireless Tracker, though, do seem to kind of go together. Problem is they only go together if they're both in play. They're like not as good if you have one without the other. But this is certainly stuff. Opponent can attack me for 5. Wow, jeez. Now we are just doing it. I mean, the Renegade Rallier refreshes all of his mana. It's free. Because the land he gets back is 1 mana. Land coming into play is a mana from the Lotus Cobra, and then the fetch land coming into play is a mana from Lotus Cobra. So the Rallier plus Lotus Cobra, yeah, that is actually just great. So if I don't trade with this Tireless Tracker now, I probably won't get another opportunity to do so, but I think that I'm just going to take the 3. I think the way that I'm going to win is similar to last game where I kind of punked my opponent out of the game. That was this is turn 3 for my opponent. And my opponent has 11 power on the board and has potential to draw 4 extra cards. Jesus. That's 6 mana. Yeah, I'll block. I don't feel good about this. It's one of those situations where it's like hard for me to envision how I'm going to win this. Yeah, my opponent was certainly out of cards that do things. Azusa? Whoa, this is full. Oh wait, I was definitely supposed to try to Spell Queller that. Okay, let's try to hit a Reflector Mage here before all is completely lost. I was in such shock that there was an Azusa, I forgot that I had a Collected Company and Spell Quellers in my deck. Apparently we're minorly rewarded. Actually, doesn't really work out that well because our opponent can just replay it. Maybe I should have actually just bounced the Tireless Tracker. I mean, that doesn't actually really do anything either because my opponent just replays that and he's only down 1 clue. So yeah, that kind of did nothing. Maybe actually I was supposed to bounce the Lotus Cobra. No, because my opponent can just crack the fetch land and replay that. So I'm kind of just, yeah. Just in bad shape. Whoa. I did see the Crucible, but it didn't really make sense until now. Dude, this is ridiculous. I'm so glad I'm recording this match. Well, that Elspeth's probably going to be pivotal. Should probably just play it. So all my opponent has is an Azusa. And I could obviously kill the Tireless Tracker, but that doesn't really get me anywhere. My opponent's definitely going to be able to do a lot this turn. Pay 2 mana, draw an extra card, play Azusa. And, I mean, there's 2 fetch lands in the graveyard. This might be a game where I try to just ultimate with Elspeth. I wonder what the big payoff is in this deck. You can't just win with big Tireless Trackers. There's Knight of the Reliquary and Gavony Township. But it still seems like you need a little bit more power. Like I wonder if there's like a Cradle Hoof Behemoth or something like that in this deck. Like my opponent can get a lot of stuff, but if he's drawing all these extra cards and making all this extra mana and can't beat an Elspeth, seems like something to worry about, basically. And I feel like from game 1, by the way things played out, that my opponent doesn't have Kessig Wolf Run. Although, if my opponent has Kessig Wolf Run, then I'm just super dead. Dead nerd walking. You know, and for all these clues, my opponent hasn't actually had time to draw them yet. I think there's got to be something my opponent's got that can give trample, though. Selesnya Charm. Selesnya Charm is such gas. Exile your Knight of the Reliquary. Kill your Elspeth. That is what Selesnya Charm does. Opponent's really doing a lot of stuff. I'm not really sure if any of my opponent's stuff does anything other than run his clock down. I think that's the first time I've seen black mana. My opponent had Zealous Persecution. That would be wicked. Zealous Persecution would kill me. It's just more of the same stuff. I don't know. It's not looking good for the opposing brew. Hmm. Um, I think what I want to do is not really sure what I want to do. I guess I want a tracker. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think I want a tracker. I don't think exiling the 2 lands my opponent has is actually going to do anything. And if I thought my opponent had access to any kind of trample effect, I would consider minusing the Elspeth. But not really that worried about it now. If my opponent like now that my opponent has Ghost Quarter, my opponent could just completely cut me off of red mana, which would be kind of a big deal. Because that would mean that I couldn't go for a Kessig Wolf Run kill. But I am going to likely be able to go for an Elspeth Sun's Champion Ultimate, kill my opponent that way. So me and my opponent are both very short on clock time, though. This is the sort of situation where I'm really happy that I'm not at a live tournament, because at a live tournament, this would just be a draw 100%. My opponent could just play a little slower, still play at a perfectly reasonable pace, where there'd be no reason for a judge to give a slow play warning, but would just be able to completely draw us into time with all these clues and fetch lands and all this stuff to sequence. Yeah, I would be very annoyed if this was a live match. I'm really happy I'm playing it online. Alright, now I get to see more cards from my opponent's deck. I have to imagine that there's something like Craterhoof Behemoth. There's some sort of big mana payout. Maybe there's an Emrakul. Like, why not? Maybe there's a Pelucranos. I mean, Nykthos would generate some mana. This is pretty crazy that this is my opponent's turn 5. Oh shoot, I don't have any flyers. Maybe I'm gonna draw. So I think what I want to get, I have that many fetch lands left. Not exactly what I was hoping for. I think it is Scavenging Ooze time so that that Ghost Corridor doesn't get completely out of control. So I think probably what I'll do is get a Gavony Township, because that should be threatening enough that my opponent kind of needs to Ghost Quarter it. Um, and then I'll be free to I'll be free to Wolf Run for the win. Oh, my opponent has another Ghost Quarter. That's annoying. And a Gavony Township. So Gavony Township's pretty good. But fortunately, my opponent only gets one activation from it. And I don't think that's going to be enough to really swing things anyway. A lot of mana, though. My opponent's basically able to draw and play every card in his deck. And the reason I'm not exiling the fetch lands in my opponent's graveyard is because after having drawn so many cards, I just assume my opponent has extra fetch lands in hand. You could just deploy instead. Spellskite. That's one way to deal with Kessig Wolf Run. So I think this game's going to unfortunately be a timeout on my opponent's side. Pretty interesting game. I think I'm a favorite to win from here. Just because I have the Elspeth. Like all I need to do is find like a flying blocker. But the Ghost Corridors could change the formula. But so could a Path to Exile. Wow, Elishnorn. Oh, maybe I would have lost that turn. So Elishnorn would have killed all my soldiers, would have made my Voice of Resurgence die. It would have come back so that I would have had a 1-1 because I still would have Tireless Tracker and another Reliquary in play. And yeah, my opponent attacks with everything, and I would have been dead. Jeez. Yeah, that's unfortunate. If my opponent had like 20 more seconds, I probably would have been dead. Wow. All right. Well, that's that. All right, so here we are in our final match. I still feel a little bad about winning that last one. If I had a few more seconds to think about that Elishnorn, I think I would have just conceded before my opponent timed out, but fortunately I didn't really see that card until it was too late. But that was pretty wild. Man, a lot of Temple Gardens tonight. And now an Aether Vial Temple Garden. I have like most of my colors covered in this particular situation because of the Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise. But I definitely want to get a Shockland. I don't want to get a basic because I assume that I'm against a Path to Exile deck, and the game goes long. I still want to be able to get those. Ooh, Oath of Nissa. That's a card I like. I love me an Oath of Nissa. I'm actually pretty interested in a deck that plays Oath of Nissa in like a Hate Bear shell, where your creatures are kind of your spells. Problem is like most of the Hate Bear decks that the creatures just really aren't that good. And this is not a powerful turn for my opponent. So I think here that I want to play the Voice first, and then the Hierarch. And next turn I'm almost definitely playing Township and double Ooze, because I think this is going to be a matchup where I can just play some extra creatures and then just start pumping. Feels like my opponent's pretty far behind, even with this. Yeah, I mean, whatever, man. That doesn't do anything. And this might be over already. I don't know. Opponent's got flyers. Ooh, Ghost Quarter's pretty big game. Can I find anything? Nope. Oh, you want to race? Sure. So do this. Then we'll see what that Aether Vial can do. So I'm planning on cracking this. So doesn't really make any sense to is it Displacer? It is the Displacer. Four, 7. I might actually just be dead to a Reality Smasher. Would be kind of disappointing. But now that my opponent has chosen to not tap down my Birds of Paradise. I will not be dead to a Reality Smasher. But this Displacer is going to be quite annoying to deal with. I think I do want to block. So Knight of the Reliquaries, quite nice. But not really what the doctor ordered. And these flyers are going to be a bit of a problem. So my opponent can blink my elemental to just kill it, obviously, which is super annoying. But I don't really have any way to deal with these flyers. And so I need to push as hard as I can in this race. And here my opponent can tap down one of my creatures and make me chump block with the Hierarch, but he or she doesn't have something else. I can block here and gain a life. That means I'm going to be at 1 once combat damage resolves. If I could draw a fetch land or a path to exile. Wow, I think my opponent just didn't account for that. That was pretty crazy. Little surprised that I won that one, but you know, I'll take it. All right, so I think Izzet Staticaster is going to be good here. I don't think this is a matchup where I want Spell Queller, but Izzet Staticasters and Reflector Mages seem good. And Qasali Pridemage seems a little weak. I mean, there's Aether Vial, but that's like it. So I think the way we're going to do this is Pridemage and Spell Quellers come out. And these 6 cards come in. And that should about do it. Wow, this is a good hand. I think Oath of Nissa is so good. I love that card. Getting this Tireless Tracker is really good too. Yeah, I don't care about that. Come on now. So my opponent doesn't have that many ways to kill creatures. All right, so I can have a pretty good turn here. I can do this. And then I can do this. And I can say go, and if my opponent activates the displacer, actually, if my opponent is Aven Mind Sensor, that would be pretty annoying. So, I guess I'll just do it now. Even though it gives my opponent extra mana. Maybe that was a bad play, but I was like, my opponent has Aven Mind Sensor or like a Restoration Angel. These are cards that this specific deck a lot of the times doesn't play, but I feel like I'm in such an advantageous position here. But I just want to make sure, like, whatever plan I have, I can still do. I feel like at this point I can just shove. And that's it. Opponent has conceded from the game. Well, we got a nice little 3-2. Pretty sweet deck. I like it a lot. It's got a lot of good things going on in it. I really enjoy playing a deck with neither Reliquary and Noble Hierarch, and the fact that we have cool things to do with our mana base. We have explosive things that we can do. You know, we have good ways to make it so that we don't easily flood out and don't easily get mana screwed. Like we had a game there where we were doing a lot and it was like turn 5 and we hadn't hit our second land drop. So all in all, pretty impressive deck. Definitely gonna sort of think about it and revamp a build for the article, which you guys have probably already seen by scrolling down. But definitely a cool one. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll catch you guys later. Hope you have a great week. The spoilers are all out now, so you can start brewing in full throttle. But we have a banned list coming out next Monday, so that's going to be where the manure really hits the fan. But anyway, have a good one. I'll check you guys later. Thanks for watching.